Welcome to this session. In this session we will discuss the Mimamsa philosophy. As you know that whenever we start a new school or a new system, then we are intended to give a brief background of it, or a historical background of it. So therefore, in the same way, we are now going to discuss a brief historical background of the Mimamsa philosophy. So once you know the background, that may arouse interest in you to know more about Mimamsa thinkers' thought on many of the issues. You may be inclined to know many more issues, those are related to the Mimamsa philosophy. So therefore, whenever we start a new schools, we have a habit, and it is good to know a little bit background of it, when it is developed, why it is developed, and when it is established, who are those thinkers really contributed for the establishment of the school, so on and so forth. Now let us start with the background, a little background. The Mimamsa philosophy is believed to be originated in the Mithila city. People believe that this philosophy is a particular philosophy. Mimamsa philosophy deals with Veda, Vedanta, and all the aspects of Vedanta. Very particularly, people believe that it was originated in the Mithila city. Further, they also believed that Gemini was the founder of this school, because Gemini has written a manuscript known as Mimamsa Sutra. So therefore, the basic text of Mimamsa philosophy is known as Mimamsa Sutra, which is written by Gemini. That Mimamsa Sutra was not in an elaborate form, rather you can say that like a short note form. The Sabara Swami is another scholar, another thinker in the direction towards Vedantic philosophy, in direction towards the Vedas, in direction towards the ultimate principles, has elaborated the Mimamsa Sutra, which is written by Gemini, in a very lucid way. And these lucid writings really attracted to many thinkers in that time, even much after that time. Followed by Sambara Swami, we find the work written by Kumarila Bhatta. Kumarila Bhatta, really known for his contribution to the Mimamsa philosophy. People also believe that it is Kumarila Bhatta, and after that Prabhakara Mishra, who has also believed that there is a time when Prabhakara Mishra was a student of Kumarila Bhatta, although Prabhakara Mishra thought on Mimamsa philosophy in a different direction. In other words, Prabhakara Mishra and Kumarila Bhatta, they are student and teacher. Nevertheless, both of them has an independent opinion on Mimamsa philosophy. On some of the grounds, their opinion are common. On some of the grounds, they differ on their opinions. That also we will discuss, on which grounds Prabhakara Mishra and Kumarila Bhatta differs their opinion. Now, followed by Sambara Swami, this Kumarila Bhatta has written the commentaries on the Mimamsa Sutra. Then after that, Prabhakara Mishra developed some of the thoughts on Mimamsa philosophy, and much after that Murari Mishra. So it is not that only these 3-4, the name I have stated to you, there are many other scholars equally contributed for the development and establishment of the Mimamsa philosophy. As we can see now, the system as such, as an independent system of Mimamsa philosophy, is because of the various contribution made by the different scholars in different times. So it took at least a long period for its establishment as an independent school of thought among other schools. Therefore, people believe that the work, the major work written by Sambar Swami, Kumarila Bhatta, Prabhakara Mishra, because they have really not only written the commentaries on the Mimamsa Sutra, but also brings the school into the limelight. Therefore, people also consider that if Mimamsa philosophy is now exists because of there are thinkers, there are scholars who really devoted so much of their rational thinking on it. Further, this school comes to the limelight through Savarami Swami, Kumarila Bhatta, Prabhakara Mishra and Murari Mishra's writings on it. Mimamsa means investigation. It is about the attainment of heaven. Mimamsa, as I said, that Mimamsa philosophy in particular deals with the Veda or the Vedantic thought. It always tries to understand the knowledge, how one should attain the heaven, how one should reach to the heaven, what work really leads a human being or a practitioner to reach to the heaven. And for them, heaven is the place where we find all virtue, we find all equality, we find everything in equilibrium state. Once things are found in an equilibrium state, obviously one will feel happy by staying over there, by residing over there. Therefore, Mimamsa philosophy, while dealing with Vedanta, always seeks to understand that what practice one needs to do in his or her life, as a result he or she can reach to the heaven, and heaven should be the destination for each and everyone on the view of Mimamsaka philosophy. Then it is about the interpretation of the Vedic rituals. Mimamsa is of two kinds. One is Dharma Mimamsa, another is Jnana Mimamsa. Dharma Mimamsa is known as Purva Mimamsa. Jnana Mimamsa is known as Uttara Mimamsa. Purva Mimamsa is known as the Mimamsa philosophy that we are discussing now, and Uttara Mimamsa is later development of Mimamsa philosophy, which is known as Vedantic philosophy, or in other words, Advaita Vedantic thought. So therefore, two kinds of Mimamsa that you can find. One is Purva Mimamsa, which talks about the Mimamsa philosophy as such, and another is Uttara Mimamsa, which talks about the Vedantic traditions. As you know that there are different pairs we find in Indian philosophy like Sankhya Yoga, Nyaya Vaisheshika. In the same way, Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa constitute a pair. When Purva Mimamsa or the Mimamsika talks about the Karma Kanda, that what action one should do in his or her life, what rituals one should do, one sacrifice one must practice in his or her life, the same thing expressed in the form of knowledge in Vedanta. Vedanta talks about the Jnana Kanda. Karma Kanda here means what should a person do as his or her duty in his or her life endeavor. Whereas in Vedanta it is said that how one should realize the perfect knowledge, how one should realize the ultimate principle known as Brahman, how Brahman can be different from Atman, how one should really works on his or her understanding so that he or she can understand the nature of soul and also able to discriminate soul from the Brahman, because Brahman is the supreme soul and we the human beings, we the animals, we the beings which have a life in this earth have an individual soul. So therefore, in Vedanta philosophy it is clearly stated that knowledge can be acquired if one can understand the true nature of soul or self, which find among all these beings those are living in this earth, and the soul which find only in one person known as supreme being. Therefore, Karma Kanda and Jnana Kanda are interrelated with each other in this perspective. Moving further, the Mimamsa philosophy deals with rituals. As I said, rituals means karma. People many times misunderstand the concept. Whenever you talk about rituals, they think that like a puja. Like in Hindu tradition, they are doing many kind of puja. They are doing puja for say Durga, Kali, so and so goddesses, as well as few gods like Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, so and so forth. But here, if you see the Mimamsikas' interpretation of rituals, they said that one should do his or her duty by understanding, by knowing his or her position in the societal life. If one can do so, then he or she is performing his duties. That is the real connotation what Mimamsikas means while delivering, while uttering the words rituals. They said that one must do some kind of rituals to reach to the heaven, to go to the virtuous place where everything is in equilibrium state. Thus they said the Mimamsa philosophy deals with the rituals, while Vedanta school is concerned with knowledge. Whatever we do in the form of rituals, in the form of our duties, that should be understood in the form of knowledge in the Vedantic tradition. So therefore, you can see a link between Mimamsa philosophy and Vedanta philosophy. Mimamsa philosophy concerns about the duties of an individual, and Vedanta philosophy on the other hand deals with the understanding of the true nature of knowledge about our karma, about our action, about our performance, and about the true nature of soul which pervades everywhere, which exists eternally. Now Mimamsa school is concerned with Dharma and Vedanta is with Brahman. Mimamsa is also known as Purva Kanda, Karma Kanda, Dharma Mimamsa. See, now Mimamsa philosophy is a now open book. People have given a different name by understanding what they mean, what they are discussing about, why they consider it an independent school. Since they are focusing on the Karma Kanda, people say that it is a Purva Kanda. Purva Kanda means you should do something, then you must understand why you are doing that. Then only you can able to achieve the heavenly life, the peaceful life, the blissful life. Therefore, different people has given different name to it, and Mimamsa philosophy is known by different name. As I said, one is Purva Kanda, another is Karma Kanda, the third one is Dharma Mimamsa. It deals with the Vedic injunctions about rituals, the rules of the interpretation of the text, which remove the apparent contradictions among them and harmonize them with one another. Now till this much, we need to understand what Mimamsa philosophy describes about. Mimamsa philosophy deals with the Vedic text. As you know that there are different Vedas, there are different Upanishads, and many times we find there is a contradiction on a particular issue. Let us say Atman. People consider Atman as an individual soul which resides in all these individuals, those are living in this earth, starting with animal, reptiles, human beings, say birds, even worms, even small insects. There are many other thinkers, they believe that Atman means the supernatural soul, which really guides all the movements in this earth, which really controls the movement of earthly living creatures as well as non-living creatures. Now apart from these thoughts, there are many other people who believe that Atman means something eternal, something can be only realized. It cannot be explainable, it cannot be describable, because anything that we wish to describe about Atman, this is less, very less, and it cannot satisfy the all features of that Atman. Further, they said that Atman is such a subtle element. This cannot be known through any kind of pramana that we have in our hand, like perception, inference, comparison and testimony. So, this kind of abstract nature of Atman people also described. To resolve all the conflict, while understanding the concept Atman, here Mimamsa philosophy contributes a lot. They try to reconcile different thoughts people has interpreted Atman. In this context, Mimamsa said that one should not understand a concept such a manner that it should contradict with other thoughts. Therefore, here Mimamsa philosophy contributes a lot to resolve the contradiction among other schools' opinion on particular issues like Atman, Brahman, soul, so and so forth. Thus, they said that while dealing with Vedic injunctions, the Mimamsa philosophy also talks about the rules of interpretation of the text which remove the apparent contradictions among them and harmonize them with one another, and the philosophical justification of the beliefs underlying ritualism. Further, they said that one should understand why there is a conflict and how the conflict can be resolved among different schools on their opinion on a particular issue, and further what is the philosophical significance behind it to understand the particular rituals that one needs to do to reach to the heavenly life. There are two things, if you can see, Mimamsa philosophy contributes a lot in these two aspects. The first said that there are many conflicts that we find among different Vedas or Upanishads on different issues. Here Mimamsa philosophy try to resolve all the conflicts. The second one, they said that one must understand the philosophical perspective for which we must have a belief. One must understand the philosophical perspective for which one must have a belief to do some kind of rituals in his or her life. So, there are two things very clearly stated by Mimamsa philosophy. Further, Mimamsa philosophy also believes in the reality of the external world, reality of the individual soul and law of karma. They also believes, like other schools, the law of karma, that karma really helps us for our rebirth, and good karma certainly leads a good birth, and a bad karma certainly implies a birth which is having a lower creature, which may be considered as animals or insects, certainly lower creature than human being. While believing the concept, the external world and the individual soul, they said that whether the external world is temporary or permanent, but we must accept the existence of the external world. Because of the external world, we all individual, both being and non-being, exist in this earth. So, therefore, without any doubt, we must accept the existence of the external world, and there are different objects exist in this world. Further, they said that there are two kinds of objects or two kinds of beings that we find they are living in this earth. One is living creature, another is non-living creature. In case of a living creature, we find they have a motion, they have a recreation, they have an ability to understand some issues, they have an ability to identify some issues. Therefore, they might have soul, as a result they could be able to do so. For example, an animal can identify which flesh they can eat or what is their food. A deer need not to identify a flesh to eat, rather can find out the grass to eat. In the same way, a tiger finds out the flesh to eat. not the grass. In the same way, they said that all those creatures, those who have a life in this earth, must have a soul. Therefore, they believe three things. One is the law of karma, the second one is the existence of the external world, and the third one is the existence of the individual soul which reside in all the life those are living in this earth. Now, moving further, they said that Mimamsa philosophy, while believing the heaven and hell, they also believes the transmigration and liberation of the soul. I said that Mimamsa philosophy talks about karma kanda, talks about dharma, talks about duty. So therefore, since they talks about karma, they believe that there is a law of karma theory. Depends on your karma, you will get your rebirth. Depend on your past karma, it will be decided which birth you will take in your next life. So in this way, they say that there is a transformation we find. If you have done some good karma in the past, there is a transformation of the karma we find in your next birth. They further said that by doing some kind of rituals, practices, one can also attain the liberation. While an individual attains the liberation, his or her soul will be in a equilibrium state, will be in a happy state, will be in a blissful state. Therefore, while believing the transformation of the soul, they also believe that we can attain the liberation even while living in this earth. To get that liberation, we must do some karma, we must do our duties religiously and synchronically. Further, they believe on the heaven and hell. They said that it is the good karma which leads us or which takes us to the heaven, where life will be very peaceful. But if you do the bad karma, you will go to the hell, where you have to suffer a lot. Further, they said that there are many gods, there are not only one God. So therefore, one need to worship the different god for the different purposes, because if you read the Vedic text, they prescribe different god. It's a god like Agni, Varuna, Ruta, many more. God for the cultivation, God for the water, God for the fire, God for the wind, so on and so forth. So you might be knowing that whenever there is a cultivation end, people celebrate some of the festival in Hinduism. They believe that it is a god which helped them to earn all the crops. Whenever there is a flood, people also worship God, because they believe that by worshipping God, the flood never come further, or the flood never destroy many more things. So in the same way, Mimamsikas believes there are different gods, and different gods can do different things. By understanding the nature of gods, we must worship gods, we must do some kind of karma in the form of sacrifices, so that we may attain some kind of heavenly life. Thus they said that we should not believe only in one God. There are many other schools, they believe only one God who is really controlling all the motions of the living creature and non-living creature of this earth. They said that there is nothing called supreme God. There are different gods and many gods, and all gods are supreme in this way. The same thing I have written here. Mimamsika rejects the notion of one God who is believed to be creator, preserver and destroyer of the universe. It believes in the eternality and infallibility of the Vedas. Mimamsikas clearly stated that we should not have any doubt on the Vedic text. Vedic text is the one and only pious and virtuous text where everything is written clearly. Even in the present society, whatever we find, whatever people are doing, some or other form, directly or indirectly, written in this Vedic text. So Vedic text is undoubtedly true and valid. It is non-erroneous. one may doubt on God, but one should not doubt on the text which is found in the Vedic period, which is found in the Vedas. Therefore, they said that Vedic texts are non-erroneous. It should free from all doubts. On the account of this school, the unseen force is known as Apurva, which takes sacrifice to the heaven. If you do your duty, if you do your karma, that will be known as Apurva, something extraordinary, because all living creatures cannot do their duties as it is prescribed, as it is expected to be done. But if an individual can able to do that, he or she certainly can achieve some kind of extraordinary quality, some kind of extraordinary power, that is Apurva, and because of the Apurva he can attain the heavenly life. He can reach to the heaven where life will be peaceful, blissful and very happy. He can detach from all kind of suffering that we find in this earth. So thus one must try to get Apurva in his or her life. Further, it said that among Mimamsa thinkers, it is not the case that all the contributors have the same opinion on each and every issue described by Mimamsa philosophy. There are thinkers who have given the contradictory opinion on a particular issues. For example, Kumarila Bhatta and Prabhakara Mishra. These two thinkers have contributed a lot for the establishment and the development of Mimamsa philosophy. But if you see, their opinion on different issues differs from each other. Their opinions on different issues differ from each other. Now let us discuss on which grounds they differ from each other. Kumarila Bhatta recognizes 6 pramanas. What are those 6 pramanas? Kumarila Bhatta accepts Nyayika's pramanas. These are perception, inference, comparison and testimony. These are 4 pramanas. But here Kumarila Bhatta is not satisfied with these 4 pramanas. He added 2 more pramanas, and these 2 more pramanas are known as Anupalabdhi and Arthapatti Postulation. So therefore he accepts 6 pramanas, and for him the 6 pramanas require to understand the unknown object, to understand an object, and these are the pramanas are known as valid pramanas for cognizing an object of its true nature. On the other hand, Prabhakara Mishra said that we can only accept the 5 pramanas. 5 pramanas are known as perception, inference, comparison, testimony and Arthapatti Postulation. He rejects Anupalabdhi. He said that Anupalabdhi means non-perception, and non-perception is a part of perception, or at most we can say negation of a perception. If it is so, then non-perception cannot be considered as an independent pramana like other pramanas for having a particular cognition. So therefore, on the one hand you find Kumarila Bhatta who accepts 6 pramanas. On the other hand, we find Prabhakara Mishra who accepts only 5 pramanas by rejecting Anupalabdhi as a valid pramana. Further, Kumarila Bhatta recognizes 5 categories. If you remember, in Vaisheshika philosophy we said that categories means padartha, and according to Vaisheshika philosophy there are 7 padarthas. But here Kumarila Bhatta recognizes only 5 categories or 5 padarthas, and those are known as substance, quality, action, community and negation. Prabhakara Mishra admits 8 categories. Those are known as substance, quality, action, community, inherence, similarity, number, potency. So you can see the differences. One accepts 5 categories, other accepts 8 categories. But however, in Vaisheshika philosophy, we find that only 7 categories, and why they accept, we have already discussed those issues. Now, Kumarila Bhatta professes 11 substances, whereas Prabhakara accepts only 9 substances. Now, if you remember Vaisheshika philosophy, we said that there are 9 substances, and out of 9 substances, few are eternal and few are non-eternal. Here Kumarila Bhatta accepts 11 substances, whereas Prabhakara accepts only 9 substances. Now, let us discuss what are those 11 substances accepted by Kumarila Bhatta. The 11 substances are earth, water, light, air, ether, time, space, self, manas, darkness and sound. Now, if you deduct darkness and sound, then we have 9 substances in our hand, and these 9 substances are accepted by Prabhakar Mishra. I repeat, Kumarila Bhatta accepts all the 11 substances, but if we remove darkness and sound, which is I put in a red color over here, then all the remaining 9 substances are accepted by Prabhakar Mishra. So, according to Prabhakara, he has also given reason to that why he cannot accept these 2 substances mentioned by Kumarila Bhatta. He said that sound is the quality of ether, stands here as an akasa, and darkness is the absence of light. So, therefore, these 2 things can be subsumed under the 9 substances. Therefore, Kumarila Bhatta accepts 11 substances and Prabhakara Mishra accepts 9 substances. And while accepting the 9 substances, given the reason why he rejects the 2 extra substances mentioned by Kumarila Bhatta. These are not only differences that we had discussed. There are many other differences that we find while reading the text of Kumarila Bhatta and Prabhakara Mishra. So, we must keep in mind that these are a few differences which we had discussed, but there are many other differences remain. Those differences will be discussed as and when required while discussing the Mimamsa philosophy in a stretch, because Mimamsa philosophy takes at least more than 4 classes. So, whenever it is required, the differences or the differences which we have not discussed so far, we will discuss in that time, or if it require the same differences which we have discussed now, we can refer to these differences. Now, considering the nature of valid knowledge, what is valid knowledge? As you know that there are different schools. They said that valid knowledge means a knowledge which is non-erroneous, which is presentable in character, and which also talks about something in relation to the object, if you see the Nayakas. But now let us see how Mimamsikas treats the concept valid knowledge. According to Mimamsikas, and particularly Kumarila Bhatta, valid knowledge is that which gives knowledge of an unknown object, that means which is not known to the cognizer earlier. Further, it should not be contradicted by any other knowledge and must free from other defects. The 3 features must satisfy to have a valid knowledge. The first one is that a cognizer must acquire a knowledge on an object which is not known to him or her prior cognizing to that object. Second, it should free from all defects, and third, it should not contradict by any other knowledge. If these 3 features are satisfied, then any knowledge that we acquire, we can consider those knowledge as valid knowledge. According to him, according to Kumarila Bhatta, Prama denotes the actual experience of an unknown object. Here he categorically mentioned that whenever we have a knowledge of an object, certainly the object is unknown to the cognizer prior to this cognition, then only that knowledge will be treated as a valid knowledge. or if you know some object and further you recognize that object, here that knowledge cannot be considered as a valid knowledge. Mimamsa school said valid knowledge is of two kinds, one is perceptual, another is non-perceptual. Perceptual, we know all of us. What is perceptual? We see many objects, we see many beings, many non-beings, many moving creatures, even a lot of non-moving objects. So, because of the perception, we acquire some knowledge about those objects. While describing the concept non-perception, they said that non-perceptual knowledge or non-perceptual valid knowledge has 5 sources. Non-perceptual knowledge can be accumulated through 5 pramanas. What are those? One is perception, inference, comparison, verbal testimony, Arthapatti postulation and Anupalabdhi. Please note, this is Kumarilla Bhatta opinion on 2 kinds of knowledge. One is perceptual knowledge, another is non-perceptual knowledge. And whatever the pramana that Kumarilla Bhatta listed here, Prabhakar Mishra did not agree to that. Prabhakar Mishra said that if we exclude Anupalabdhi, then we are ready to accept what you are saying. That means, according to Prabhakar, we need 5 pramana instead of 6 pramana to have the valid knowledge. Here Mimamsikas agrees with the Nyaya school of pramana, because in all the cases, whether Kumarilla Bhatta or Prabhakar Mishra, they agreed that whatever stated by Nyaya philosophy about the pramanas, the 4 pramanas, it is agreed by this Mimamsa school. So, in brief, you can say Mimamsa philosophy accepts the 4 pramanas mentioned by Nyayakas without any deviation. But however, they have added 2 more pramanas in the list of pramanas. One is Arthapatti Postulation, another is Anupalabdhi. Here the differences lie. Kumarilla Bhatta said that these 2 extra pramanas required to have a cognition, or said to have a new cognition, whereas Prabhakar Mishra said that Anupalabdhi cannot be an independent pramana like other pramanas. Now, let us discuss what is Arthapatti. Arthapatti means postulation, an assumption. Before going to the Mimamsikas discussion of Arthapatti, let us understand what they mean. I will give an example. If you can understand that, then there will be no difficulty for you to understand Mimamsikas interpretation of Arthapatti. Arthapatti talks about that whenever we talk about a sentence, whenever we utter a sentence, it describes 2 facts, if it is a situation, and if these 2 facts are contradicting with each other, then the proposition cannot stand itself. It cannot have its own accountability for its own existence. It does not refer to anything because it is contradicting. The proposition states about 2 facts and these 2 facts are contradicting with each other. Therefore, it does not have its own standpoint. To resolve that issue, to resolve the contradiction, we as a cognizer presume or postulate some kind of new proposition which resolves that contradiction. For example, if I say Devadatta is a person who is fat and not eating in the daytime, I said that Devadatta is a fat man by fasting in the daytime. So, now there are 2 facts we find here. One is a person is fat or a person is bulky. The second fact that we find that he is fasting in the daytime. So, how is it possible that a person is fasting in the daytime and becoming fatter, becoming bulker? So, it is a contradiction in terms. Without eating anything, it should not be the case that a person should be fatter and fatter. To resolve this contradiction, we assume that Devadatta is a person or is a fat man, although he is fasting in the daytime, but certainly he will be eating in the night time heavily. This is the reason, as a result he becomes fat. The same thing described by Mimamsa philosophy. Mimamsa philosophy said that in a proposition, if we find two facts and these two facts are contradicting with each other, then here it is the responsible of the cognizer to presume something, to postulate some other proposition which resolve the contradiction that we find in the proposition. The same thing I have written here. I said that it is a method of cognition, as Kumarila Bhatta stated it. Arthapatti is divided or split into two words. One is artha, which means fact. Another is apatti. Apatti means supposition. Etymologically speaking, arthapatti is that knowledge which resolves the conflict between two facts. It gives the presumption that solves the problem between two facts. It gives the presumption that solves the problem between two facts. When a known fact cannot be accounted for without another fact, we have to assume the existence of other fact. It is important over here. I said when a known fact cannot be accounted for without another fact, we have to assume the existence of other fact. Here I have given the same example. Devadatta is fat by fasting in day. Here fat and fasting both are contradiction. However, these are two facts described or states by this proposition. There are two facts we find in this proposition. He is saying that when a known fact cannot be accounted for without another fact, a person cannot be fat by fasting in the daytime. If it is so, then there is a third fact that we need to postulate, that is Devadatta is a person might be eating the night time heavily, therefore he becomes fat. Another example I have given here. Ashoka is living and who is not in home. Here living is a fact and not in home is another fact. To resolve this contradiction, we postulate the another fact known as Ashoka may be living some other places, if not in home. If Ashoka is living and if he is not found in his home, then certainly he is living some other places, maybe near to his home, there will be some other place where he is residing. Therefore, if there is a two contradiction of a fact we find in a proposition, we need a third postulation. In this way, they said that presumption, or say if you postulate a third fact, is a valid instrument of knowledge. Now the question arises, why it should be called as a valid instrument of knowledge? Can it be reduced to any kind of pramana? Can it be reduced to perception, inference, comparison or testimony? Now first we will say whether it can be reduced to perception or not. The answer would be it cannot, because we have not seen whether Devadatta is eating in the night or not. No one has seen, but we are assuming the fact. So therefore it cannot be reduced to perception. Now let inference to be reserved at this moment. Moving to the comparison or upamana, can it be compared with another person as well? What I mean to say is that, is it the case that we can compare Devadatta with other person who is also not eating in the daytime and becomes fat? It cannot so. There are many persons not eating daytime may be thin. Therefore, this comparison does not derive a valid knowledge. Now the verbal testimony, can it be reduced to verbal testimony? Here it is said that it cannot be reduced to verbal testimony, because different people have a different opinion on this fact which is about a person is a fat by fasting in the daytime. Now the last part remains, the last pramana remains, can it be reduced to inference. If at all we try to reduce this to the inference, we will see what its consequences in the next slide. Moving to this conclusion, whether it can be reduced to inference or not, we must discuss that there are two kinds of Arthapatti that we find. One is Drushtathapatti, another is Srushtathapatti. In case of Drushtathapatti, people said that in this postulation, or in this case, postulation is used to explain and elaborate the perceived incident. What they mean is that if Devadatta is a fat man and by fasting in the daytime, somebody may perceive him that he is eating in the night time. So here it can be a perception. Now Srushtathapatti, that means you hear something, and in this regard they categorically said that how we need to interpret that Srushtathapatti. They said that postulation assists to explain and resolve some subject, some content, some understanding which is heard. For example, the fact that the village from which Rama hails is on the Jamuna can be understood only when this statement is interpreted as meaning that the village is situated on the banks of the river. What they mean is that if you claim that Rama belongs to the village Jamuna, then we must know that Jamuna is a village which is situated bank of the river Jamuna. If this is so, then this can be a Arthapatti, this can be a postulation. If at all you say that Rama comes from a village Jamuna, then our assumption would be that Jamuna is a river and Jamuna is a village must be placed in the bank of that river. In this case, Arthapatti postulation will be considered as a valid instrument of knowledge or a valid pramana. Now considering the concept whether Arthapatti can be reduced to inference or not, if at all it is reduced to inference, then the inference structure will find in this way: a man who is not eating in the night while fasting by day is not fat. The second premise, this man while fasting by day is fat, and the conclusion will derive by taking together the premises that therefore this is not a man who does not eat at night. In this inference we find the lack of Vyapta relation. The Vyapta relation, as you know, that it is a relation between major term and middle term. It is an inseparable, invariable, universal and concomitant relation between the major term and middle term. Since we do not find this kind of relation between the Hetu and Sadhya, we cannot reduce Arthapatti into the inference. Why we cannot find this kind of Vyapta relation? Because it is not the case that all men, those are fat, eat at night only. There may be cases where people are not eating in the night, they may be fat. Further, therefore we said that it is an independent pramana among others. So I hope you have understood now the Arthapatti postulation mentioned by Mimamsikas. In the next class we will discuss Anupalabdhi, how it is considered as an independent pramana according to Mimamsa philosophy. Thank you.